Good morning and welcome to our presentation. My name is Lydia Tisma and I'm the coordinator for Autism Services. My colleagues Jennifer Riddler and Jessica Lenarsik, who are consultants on our team, and I will share some information about supporting the transition from kindergarten to grade 1 for students on the autism spectrum. So let's start with a land acknowledgement. The land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Thank you. Before we start our presentation, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. Please keep your microphone turned off if possible. Also, please feel free to post your questions in the chat. We will also open the floor for questions at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. What is the purpose of our presentation? Transitioning from kindergarten to grade 1 is usually one of the major events in any child's life. And while for all children this transition can be challenging, this is particularly significant for children with autism spectrum disorder. An increasing body of evidence supports the notion that children who have a positive start to their school experience are likely to engage well and experience academic and social success. We will share some information about what a typical day looks like in grade 1 in comparison to a full day kindergarten program. And having strategies in place to support transition can reduce the amount of time it takes for your child to seamlessly transition to grade 1, increase your child's independence, and increase successful inclusion in the school and community. We will also address how to access supports in our board when needed. And now I will let Jessica walk you through the next slide.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Lydia. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at some things at more of a board level by looking at this visual as part of the multi-year strategic plan. This is the newest plan from this year, 2024, and this plan encompasses all grades in the TDSB from kindergarten to high school. Equity continues to be a guiding principle and will be embedded throughout the strategic directions. So they are as follows. So Truth and Reconciliation, as a board, we are committed to the implementation of Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. Belonging, where all students belong, are engaged and valued in an inclusive environment. Achievement, where all students reach high levels of achievement, success, and personal development. Thriving, where all students graduate with confidence, skills, and knowledge to thrive. And Revitalize, where all staff, students work and learn in inclusive, safe, and modern environments. So now we're going into the classroom and specifically looking at grade 1. And we are moving away from that play-based kindergarten program towards subjects. If you remember, the kindergarten program thinks about learning and teaching in those 4 frames. So they were belonging and contributing, self-regulation and well-being, demonstrating literacy and math behaviors, and problem solving and innovating. However, in grade 1, we do have these subjects that are taught throughout the day and then assessed on and communicated in that report card. So these are the subjects here. We've got language, math, science, social studies, health and phys ed, as well as the arts with visual arts, dance, drama, and music. And your child will be learning all of these things in grade 1. And this is a change from the play-based kindergarten program. But teachers in classrooms aren't just thinking about subjects that they need to teach, they're also thinking about building classroom relationships. Especially at this point in the year, we are kind of still at the beginning part of the year, I would say. And we know that building relationships requires the regular, authentic, positive interactions with students. And this is really the foundation to use to build from for the rest of the year. So let's look at this graphic to learn a little bit more. So teachers are thinking about connecting with caregivers, and the best way to do that, perhaps it's through a newsletter, sharing photos, daily communication book. And we know these connections with home are also key in having that culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy to honor student identity, which is so important to support the students' learning. Teachers are also thinking about student choice, ways that they can be flexible in the classroom to reflect students' needs, interests, and abilities. They're thinking about their routines and expectations. This is huge at the beginning of the year, especially, but it's great when teachers include this information in the classroom, perhaps posted on a wall, or somewhere where students can reference it throughout the year in case they forget some of those routines and expectations. So students need to know, there's a ton of routines and expectations they need to know: how to request the bathroom, how to get a drink if they're thirsty. They need to know what's expected of them when they're lining up, when they're sitting on the carpet, how to use a computer appropriately, right? So lots and lots of routines to go through at the beginning of the year. Then we've got peer collaboration, another thing to think about, and building relationships among the students in the classroom. Perhaps, there's different partnerships for different purposes. Teachers are thinking about that classroom environment. What are ways that they can set up the environment as what we sometimes refer to as the third teacher? So students, can know where to access materials. They can access perhaps different aspects of the classroom to suit their needs, such as where to go when they have big feelings, or what supports they can access if they're feeling, extra wiggly. Maybe there's a wiggle cushion or a wobble cushion or a wobble stool. Maybe there's a quiet space in the classroom they can access. And then lastly is the knowing your students part. So students know when their teacher is really genuinely interested in them, and that really matters. We know the teachers are asking maybe about their weekend, how their basketball team's doing, and maybe about a new TV show. And then they can take that information and use it to support their learning. Okay, so we're next going to look at this tiered approach. This is a graphic from the 2024 Special Education Plan, and it outlines the tiered approach to intervention to support inclusion. At the bottom of the triangle here, we've got our tier 1, which we consider kind of that universal programming. And this is kind of the base, the foundation, like the starting point for intervention that supports, around 80% of our students, and on which the other tiered interventions are built upon. So these are what we consider tier 1 are good for all approaches. For the purposes of this presentation, we're looking at mostly these tier 1 strategies. And tier 1 consists of evidence-based classroom instruction based on the Ontario curriculum. The principles of universal design for learning, or UDL, and differentiated instruction are used to ensure a variety of ways students participate and demonstrate their learning. So teachers choose effective, culturally safe, trauma-informed instructional strategies for all students in the classroom setting. Assessment in this tier is classroom-based and involves the teacher monitoring the progress of the class and noting any students with areas for growth. As we move up the triangle here, you can see we've got tier 2 is next, and that's what we consider necessary for some. And this is more of like an intentional instruction and short-term interventions for individual students or for small groups of students, in addition to the tier 1 strategies, building upon those, right? And then at the very top here, we've got tier 3, which we consider essential for a few, and that's very intentional and focused interventions that provide increased supports for students to achieve their learning goals. So in grade 1, some of these tier 1 strategies might look like some of these visuals you see at the bottom, and we'll just talk about a few possibilities here of these tier 1 strategies. So first is visual supports. We've got a nice daily schedule here as a visual. That's a great tier 1 strategy. You know, it's good for everybody. You know, we might see that at the front of the classroom, that big daily schedule that everybody's referencing. Teachers are referencing it throughout the day, you know, noting where they are sequentially. We might also see visuals like to support routines, like perhaps entry and exit routines. It might be helpful still to have those reminders of, you know, snow pants first and then jackets as we enter into the winter, and mittens always come last, of course. That's an important one. We know that all students benefit from structure and predictability. That's a great way to support independence as well. Perhaps there might be rules clearly posted so students know what is expected of them as well. We might see our class-wide positive reinforcers to increase student motivation and teaching of new skills. There's so many ways that those class-wide reinforcement might look. We might see something like a pom-pom jar, you know, like at the front of the class again, and students are earning pom-poms, perhaps individually, perhaps as a whole class. And, you know, when the pom-pom jar is full all the way to the top, they get something fun that they've agreed upon as a class. Maybe, you know, it could be something as simple as like bring your stuffy to school day, or, you know, a movie afternoon, or some extra time to play outside. So those could be some examples of class-wide reinforcement. You might see a calming or a quiet space in the classroom, similar to this picture here. That can help support regulation. We might see some visuals perhaps in that calming space, reminders of what the students could be doing in there, maybe some nice beanbag chairs, some stuffies, again, to support that self-regulation. And then another great tier 1 strategy are these sensory tools, like these noise canceling headphones. We might also see some other tools like alternate seating, for example, a wobble stool or wiggle cushion, like I mentioned before. We could also, you know, movement breaks would be another great tier 1 strategy. Okay, so I think I'm passing this on to Jen.
Thanks, Jessica. Okay, here you can see an example of a sample day in grade 1. And you can see that it's already there's a difference between kindergarten and grade 1. The shared understanding of children as competent, capable of complex thinking, curious and rich in potential and experience continues into grade 1. But play-based and center-based learning is not as prevalent. Your child will experience more transitions throughout the day, and there will be a higher expectation of independence. Okay. So here we see some strategies to teach at school to prepare for grade 1. So while in kindergarten, there will be many strategies that the teaching staff will be working on to prepare your child for grade 1. This list is not at all exhaustive, but it gives you an idea of what your child will be being taught to get them ready for the transition. Raising your hand and waiting your turn, lining up, managing personal belongings, for example. And then, you know, there are other things to consider. In kindergarten, your child may have been eating lunch in their classroom. Now they may be in the gym for lunch, or in a lunch room for lunch, which is a lot more children, a lot more noise, a lot more activity. And in most schools, there's not, the whole yard is not fenced in. So those are towards the end of kindergarten, you will see kindergarten teachers taking the children out for practice recess, because in kindergarten, there's usually a fenced in area for their play, outside play. But in grade 1, they won't have that. Okay. Next. So these are some of the strategies to practice at home to prepare for grade 1. So like at school, there are strategies that you can practice and work on at home. Things like toileting and hand washing independently. Although working on toileting at home is always a good idea, not being toilet trained is never a barrier for your child to attend school. Things like zippers and shoe tying, turn taking, my turn, your turn, moving from one activity, maybe a highly preferred activity, to a not as preferred activity, sharing. All of these things are important skills for your child as they head into grade 1. Okay, so here we have an example of many examples of visuals that aid in developing independence. So Jessica mentioned earlier the snow pants. So the list of, so it's a visual of how to get, what things need to be put on before you go outside. And then we have an example of washing hands, what you have to do in the sequence you have to do it. There's a break card, and Jessica mentioned about self-regulation and needing maybe a quiet space or a movement break. It's another example of how children can be a little more independent and advocate for themselves. It aids in that. And I am working for, it's a token economy. It could be, this one is individualized. Jessica also mentioned class-wide reinforcement. And then also a to-do list, so breaking down tasks into smaller steps to aid with that, developing their independence. Okay, and then we have this visual of accessing support in the TDSB. So if your child has, if the teacher feels there are some needs, the teacher may want to take your child to what we call school support team meeting, or SST. And if they go to that meeting and you would attend as a parent, it's determined that Tier 1 supports have been implemented, but further support is needed. The support from autism services may be an option that is recommended at SST, or occupational therapy, or speech and language pathology, etc. So, and then at some point, you can see here on this visual, the identification, placement, and review committee. If the child goes to IPRC, they may determine that a small class placement would be beneficial for the student, and that discussion can occur with you as the parent, highly involved. Okay, and Lydia.
Thank you, Jan. We also wanted to share a few resources with you. The first one is Special Education in Ontario Kindergarten to Grade 12. This Ministry of Education document can be found on their website. This publication was developed as a guide to support school boards and schools in the effective delivery of programs and services for students with special education needs. Then our TDSB guide to the Identification, Placement, and Review Committee for Parents and Guardians and Caregivers. This TDSB document outlines the IPRC process. There is also a text-to-speech audio component built into the document. We also have a guide to the individual education plan for parents, and this document has the same text-to-speech feature and allows you to choose if you want to read it or to listen to it. And lastly, our special education plan. All school boards in Ontario are required to have a special education plan and to update it annually. The purpose of the special education plan is to provide the Ministry of Education, the public, and school staff with information about special education programs and services that are provided by the school board. We invite you to check these documents and review them at your own convenience if needed. And I think that this concludes our presentation. We will be happy to answer your questions if you have any. Any questions, comments? Thank you.